Almost every part of our modern lives rely on computers in some way, and that's given criminals the opportunity to exploit technology in a way that's never before been possible. Both because of the interconnectedness of networks and their complexity, it's a constant battle between developers and hackers to keep things secure, and sometimes things go worryingly wrong. From ones that have caused billions of dollars worth of damage to those that have released confidential data or interfered with the operations of vital services. Today, I'm counting down 15 of the scariest computer viruses ever created. Number 15. Sasser. The Sasser virus first made its appearance in April of 2004, and it's classified as a worm, which means it can propagate itself across networks without requiring user interaction. The creation of this virus was attributed to a German computer science student who aimed to exploit vulnerabilities in the Microsoft OS, and would become such an issue that Microsoft offered a bounty of $250,000 to find out who was to install itself, and then a new host would begin scanning for additional targets. This aggressive method of self-propagation led to widespread disruption, as it generated significant network traffic and degraded system performance. The impact of the Sasser virus was huge. It caused millions of computers to crash and reboot repeatedly, leading to considerable downtime and loss of productivity. The full cost isn't entirely known, but with canceled flights and hospital procedures, there was a very real threat to life. Number 14. Zeus. The Zeus virus, also known as Z-Bot, is a powerful piece of malware that mainly targets Microsoft Windows systems. It was first identified in 2007 and became known for its financial and data stealing capability, mainly through the use of keylogging and form grabbing. Zeus is a type of Trojan horse. Its development has been highly effective in capturing sensitive information from individuals and organizations, and it led to substantial financial fraud and security breaches across. What made Zeus really effective and dangerous, though, was its ability to evade detection by most antivirus software. It managed this through its stealthy design and the frequent updates provided by its developers, which helped it avoid signature-based detection. Zeus has been responsible for large-scale financial theft from consumers and businesses alike, and by 2009 was said to have infected over 3.6 million computers in the US alone, with billions of dollars having been stolen. The FBI revealed that it had originated in Eastern Europe, and more than 100 people were arrested. Number 13. WannaCry. The WannaCry ransomware attack, which struck in May of 2017, was a huge event that affected hundreds of thousands of computers across 150 countries. This global cyber attack utilized the WannaCry virus, which is a type of ransomware that exploited vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows, particularly targeting those systems that were either unpatched or running older versions of Windows. The attack was victims were then presented with a ransom demand, typically in the form of Bitcoin, with a deadline for payment to receive a decryption key to regain access to their files. The demand was usually set at $300 to $600, which increased if the ransom wasn't paid within a specific time frame. The widespread impact of WannaCry included significant disruptions to critical infrastructure and services, including hospitals, banks, telecommunications services, and businesses. One of the worst affected organizations was the United Kingdom's National Health Service, where up to 70,000 devices, including computers, MRI scanners, and blood storage refrigerators, were compromised, leading to the cancellation of thousands of appointments and operations. In the end, the spread of WannaCry was eventually halted by the accidental discovery of a kill switch by a cybersecurity researcher. Number 12. Mirai. The Mirai virus was a piece of malware that surfaced in 2016 that showed the risk of using the Internet of Things. It's a type of malware known as a botnet itself, after which the device becomes part of the botnet. These infected devices are then used to launch powerful distributed denial-of-service attacks or DDoS attacks, which can overwhelm websites or networks by flooding them with traffic from multiple sources. Perhaps the most infamous instance of Mirai's impact was on the October 2016 attack on Dyn, a major DNS provider. This attack resulted in prolonged outages at major sites including Twitter, Netflix, Reddit, and CNN. This high-profile disruption brought significant attention to the vulnerabilities inherent in IoT devices and the potential scale and impact of DDoS attacks. The creators of Mirai, after realizing the potential destructiveness of their tool, eventually released its source code publicly, supposedly to evade law enforcement detection. This release led to various offshoots of the malware, worsening the security challenges. In response to the attacks like Mirai, there's been a push for better security practices in the development and mail in an email disguised as a legitimate file, such as a PDF or a Word document. Once the attachment was opened, CryptoLocker would encrypt files on a local machine and any connected network drives with a highly sophisticated encryption that was virtually impossible to break without the decryption key held by the attackers. Upon successful encryption of the user's files, CryptoLocker would display a ransom note demanding payment in exchange for the key. The ransom usually had to be paid in Bitcoin, making the transactions difficult to trace. Victims were given a strict deadline to pay, often 72 hours, with the threat that the decryption key would be destroyed if the deadline passed, leaving the encrypted files permanently inaccessible. The impact of CryptoLocker was huge, affecting both individual users and businesses across the globe. It's estimated that over 500,000 machines were infected, with a significant percentage of victims feeling that they had no choice but to pay the ransom. The risk of CryptoLocker came to a partial end in May of 2014, when a coordinated effort demonstrating its effectiveness and profitability when you're encrypting a victim's data to extort a payment. Number 10. CLES. The CLES virus, which first emerged in late 2001, is seen as one of the most destructive computer viruses of the early 2000s. As a worm, CLES propagated through email systems, exploiting vulnerabilities in, of course, Microsoft Windows, and the programs that ran on it, particularly email clients. Its ability to replicate and spread without user interaction made it really dangerous and difficult to contain. CLES had a variety of sophisticated behaviors that helped it be so effective and last as long as it did. It could replicate itself, send copies to email addresses found in a victim's address book, and even forge email headers. This meant that emails it sent appeared to come from different, often familiar addresses, increasing the likelihood of recipients opening malicious attachments and triggering the virus. One of the most troubling aspects of CLES was made worse by the virus's ability to corrupt files and overwrite data, meaning that organizations faced not only operational disruptions, but also the challenge of restoring data that had been lost forever. Number 9. Code Red. The Code Red virus emerged in July of 2001 and quickly became famous for its rapid spread. This virus, which manifested as a worm, specifically targeted computers running Microsoft's IIS web server software, where it exploited a buffer overflow vulnerability in the indexing software. Once a server was infected, the worm would replicate itself and scan the internet for other vulnerable servers to infect, and this allowed Code Red to proliferate widely and quickly. Within just a few hours of its initial outbreak, the virus had infected hundreds of thousands of servers. One of the most high-profile attacks by the Code Red worm happened on August 1, 2001, when it launched a denial-of-service attack on the White House's web servers. By instructing all infected machines to contact the importance of rapid security response, particularly as Microsoft had released a patch for the vulnerability a month before the outbreak, but many systems had not yet been updated in time. Number 8. Welchia. The Welchia or Nachi virus was found in August of 2003, and it's a network worm that displayed both harmful and beneficial characteristics. Unlike many other malicious programs, Welchia was designed to spread through networks with the intention of fixing the same vulnerabilities it exploited for entry. The self-replicating worm targeted Microsoft Windows systems that were vulnerable to specific security flaws that had also been exploited by the notorious Blaster worm, which had just surfaced a month earlier. Welchia's method of infection was to scan networks for machines that exhibited these security vulnerabilities, specifically those related to the RPC DCOM service in Windows. Once a vulnerable system was identified, Welchia would exploit the flaw to gain access, then attempt to download and install patches from operations. And the automatic changes Welchia made to system configurations and its method of self-installation without user consent posed serious concerns regarding system stability and user control, even over their own devices and data. The uncertain nature of Welchia raised ethical and practical questions within the IT community about the legitimacy and implications of using malware to combat malware. While some might argue that Welchia had a corrective purpose, its deployment method was similar to that of malicious software, making it unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Systems could crash and unintended consequences could arise from the unauthorized modifications made by this worm. Number 7. Melissa. The Melissa virus, which began to spread in March of 1999, was named after an exotic dancer from Florida, and it was one of the first viruses to effectively combine the elements of traditional viruses with the traits of a worm. Created by David L. Bread, but also inadvertently disclosed sensitive information. Melissa's impact was swift and serious. By using the email systems of affected users, the virus managed to overload email servers, disrupt corporate and government email communications, and cause significant productivity loss. The virus spread globally within hours, infecting hundreds of thousands of computers and causing estimated damages totaling from $300 to $600 million. High-profile organizations, including Microsoft and the United States Marine Corps, were forced to completely shut down their email systems to prevent further spread. In response to the outbreak, significant improvements were made in email security protocols, antivirus detection algorithms, and user awareness, and the legal repercussions for Smith were severe. He was arrested in April of 1999, and by December 1999 he pleaded guilty to releasing the virus. Eventually, he was sentenced to 20 months in federal prison, fined $5,000, and banned from accessing computer networks. With the Storm Worm is a Trojan horse program that primarily spreads itself via email. Its technical name is PCOM, but it gained the Storm Worm moniker after one of its more successful email campaigns, which baited users with subjects like 230 dead as storm batters Europe. While it was able to turn infected machines into bots or zombies that could remotely be controlled. Once infected, these machines became part of a botnet which could be used by the malware's creators, which in this case was mostly sending massive volumes of spam emails, conducting DDoS attacks, and stealing personal information from the infected host. The virus spread itself by sending out emails with enticing headlines that played on current events or personal interests, and these emails contained malicious links or attachments that, when clicked or opened, would execute the Stormworm. At its peak, the Stormworm botnet was believed to include millions of compromised computers and accounted for a large percentage of the world's spam. Its ability to evade detection and counter love letter is one of the most virulent computer viruses ever created. It first appeared on May 4, 2000, originating in the Philippines, and it quickly became a global problem due to its rapid spread. This malware combined social engineering with simple script writing to wreak havoc on personal and corporate computer systems everywhere. The I Love You virus was a worm that could spread itself by automatically sending copies to all contacts in the victim's Microsoft Outlook email address book. This method of distribution was incredibly efficient, and it resulted in the virus infecting tens of millions of computers within just a few days. The delivery mechanism of the I Love You virus was deceptively simple yet effective. It arrived in email boxes with the subject line, I love you, and an attachment named loveletterforyou.text.vbs. The double extension of the file was a trick used by the creators, as the .vbs was executable code, but it was easily overlooked by users who $8.7 billion globally. Companies and government agencies worldwide had to shut down their email systems in order to stop the spread of the virus and begin recovery. The creators of the I Love You virus were eventually identified as young Filipino computer programming students. At the time, though, no law in the Philippines specifically addressed computer hacking, so initially they weren't charged with any crime related to the release of the virus. However, the event led to increased cybersecurity legislation worldwide, including in the Philippines, which soon passed its first cybercrime law. Number 4. SQL Slammer. The SQL Slammer, also known as Sapphire, began causing problems in January of 2003 as a highly aggressive and fast-spreading worm that targeted vulnerabilities in Microsoft's SQL Server and MSDE 2000. It exploited a buffer overflow issue in the system which allowed it to execute its payload and replicate itself rapidly, which was, at the time, a unique. It caused widespread denial of service on some of the internet's core infrastructure, including the disruption of thousands of ATMs, cancellation of airline flights, and interference with elections and emergency services. The design of the SQL Slammer was straightforward yet effective. It didn't try to steal information or corrupt systems, but instead spread itself to create massive network congestion. This congestion came from the enormous amounts of network traffic generated as each newly infected system would then scan for other vulnerable systems at random, using the same exploit. This method of random scanning combined with a high rate of replication meant that the slammer worm could double its rate of infection approximately every 8.5 seconds at its peak, making it one of the fastest spreading worms of its time. The SQL slammer highlighted several critical vulnerabilities and shortcomings in network and database management practices, and again showed how important it is to keep systems updated. The aftermath of the SQL slammer also had long-lasting effects on how organizations handle. Conficker is mainly known for its ability to infect computers through a flaw in the Windows Server service used by Windows 2000, XP, Vista, Server 2003, and Windows Server 2008. The worm exploits a vulnerability in the way that Windows systems allocate memory for processing remote procedure call requests. Microsoft issued a patch for the vulnerability just a month before Conficker started spreading, but many systems remained unpatched and vulnerable. Once installed, Conficker disables several system services, including Windows Automatic Update, Windows Security Center, Windows Defender, and Windows Error Reporting, to prevent both the detection of the worm and the ability to fix the vulnerabilities it exploits. This makes it challenging for users to remove the worm from their computer and restore the affected services. To make things worse, Conficker is a highly sophisticated piece of software and uses a variety of advanced techniques to avoid detection and enhance its durability, including polymorphic code, dynamic domain generation, and peer-to-peer traded the UK Ministry of Defense and other significant institutions. In response to the worm, the Conficker Working Group was set up in 2008 as a coalition of researchers, security firms, domain registries, and universities. This group worked together to reduce the spread of Conficker by coordinating defenses and disrupting its CNC communications. Despite these efforts, though, Conficker remains active in some regions even to this day, persisting on machines that are either poorly protected or have not been updated with security patches. Number 2. Stuxnet. Stuxnet is a highly sophisticated computer worm that was discovered in 2010, and one of the reasons it was so problematic was it's believed to have been in development for at least 5 years. It was the first known worm developed to target and sabotage industrial systems, and unlike most malware, which typically aims to steal data or cause systems to crash, Stuxnet was designed to subtly manipulate industrial control systems, so without detection, and cause the physical destruction of the centrifuges by making them spin out of control while simultaneously showing operators that everything was functioning normally. As it targeted Iranian devices, Stuxnet is widely believed to have been developed by the United States and Israel, though neither has officially acknowledged responsibility. Its discovery forced the world to reconsider the potential for cyberattacks to cause significant physical damage and disrupt critical infrastructure, and it forced governments to reassess security procedures. The worm used multiple zero-day exploits, which are vulnerabilities that are unknown to the software vendor at the time of the attack, and had a complex load of attack code that had components for spreading, hiding, and hijacking. Stuxnet reportedly ruined approximately 1/5 of Iran's nuclear centrifuges. The way it was designed allowed Stuxnet to spread through USB flash drives, exploiting a vulnerability in the way Windows processes shortcuts. This method allowed record-breaking speed across the internet, primarily through email, and even now, over 20 years later, it still holds this record. It highlighted significant vulnerabilities in digital communication systems and marked a turning point in how security experts and corporations dealt with the threat of network worms. It was so effective at spreading through email because it contained deceptive language that would encourage users to open a file attachment that appeared to be harmless. The emails often included text that made the attachment seem like error messages from mail servers or other system notifications, prompting users to click on them without suspicion. Once executed, MyDoom installed itself on the host machine and began the process of replicating and sending itself to email addresses found in the user's address book. This propagation method was not only highly effective, but it also contributed to a significant overload of email systems worldwide. In addition to email propagation, MyDoom had a secondary method of spreading through the Kazaa peer-to-peer file-sharing network. It copied it towards SCO due to its legal actions. The economic impact of MyDoom was enormous, with estimates of the damage ranging up to $38 billion. These costs mainly added up because of productivity losses, server downtime, network congestion, and the spending required to combat the infection. Even years after its initial outbreak, variants of MyDoom continued to appear, showing that its code base was still being used to create new threats. And this persistence shows just how sophisticated a design it had, and the ongoing challenges that malware present to cybersecurity efforts. It's amazing that it's still the fastest spreading virus of all time, but in many ways that proves programmers, network administrators, and day-to-day users are much more aware of the threats that can be posed. In the early 2000s, it was a relatively new phenomenon, but now, with so much of our lives relying on technology, processes are in place to prevent mass attacks like these, and cyber criminals instead focus on smaller, more focused attacks.